Welcome to Terrific Talk. My name is Tom Anderson. Tom Anderson.
Back to win back the game. Gone. Back, gone. Tom
Anderson.
Great cash, homie. Great cash, homie.
I feel ready to go another 9 innings.
Touchdown.
I feel ready to go another 9 innings.
Touchdown.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
Terrific Talk Podcast. Welcome back, Terrific Talk Podcast.
Here comes the host.
I'm your host, Tom Anderson.
first.
Behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Nets win it.
Welcome to Terrific Talk. I'm Tom Anderson. Special podcast for you today. We're talking Nets basketball with the tremendously talented sports broadcaster, Chris Carrino. Chris has worked 11 seasons as the radio play-by-play voice of Nets basketball. Over the years, he has described some of the greatest moments in franchise history, including both NBA Finals appearances in 2002 and 2003. He's someone I've been listening to almost my entire life and is a broadcaster I greatly admire. So without further ado, I'm proud to have Chris join me on Terrific Talk. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Tom, for that terrific introduction. That's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
Well, I heard that when you were around 8, 9, 10 years old, you would turn down the volume on your TV and you would announce the game yourself into a tape recorder. What do you think drew you to announcing at such a young age?
You know, I think about that when I see my own 8-year-old son now, and he's got his little iPod Touch, and he does the same thing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know obviously why he does it now, because he sees me and he wants to emulate me. But I was just really drawn to professional sports, and it was a different time. I mean, my son's growing up at an age now where there's so much coverage, and he could turn on ESPN at any hour of the morning and catch the entire sports center. When I was a young kid, you know, there was no cable. There was still only about 7 channels, and it was a treat to watch a game. So I don't know what it was exactly that drew me, but something did, and I fell in love with it, and it was. Like every young kid, I always wanted to be one of the players, and then you get to a certain age where you realize you're not going to be, and you're able to mix, in my part, a gift for public speaking with your love of the game. And I was lucky enough to go to Fordham University in the Bronx, which is a university that produced such sportscasting greats as Vin Scully. Mm-hmm. And guys that are working right now, especially in the New York area, like Mike Breen and Bob Papa and Michael Kay. And so you get to that point where you realize that you have a gift to do this, that you can do it for a living, that you can make your life going to professional sporting events and talking about it. And it's a dream come true, and it's something that whenever it feels like work sometimes, I have to remember being that 9-year-old kid sitting on my parents' bed with the sound turned down, calling that game into my tape recorder, and that brings you back and reminds you why you're so fortunate to be doing what you're doing.
And you mentioned your son trying to emulate you. What sportcasters, when you were young, influenced you growing up?
But growing up in New York, it was Marv Albert. I mean, he was the voice of the Knicks and the Rangers at the time, and NBC Sports, and so that was a guy that was absolutely a huge influence on every kid that came out of this area, the New York area, to become a sportscaster. So it was him first and foremost. And then as I got older, when I got to college at Fordham, Marty Glickman was my broadcasting coach. He would come up once a week and listen to our tapes and talk to us. And Marty was a legendary play-by-play man who had taught Marv Albert. And when I went to see Marty, that was where it went from just listening to someone and being influenced to actually being taught by someone for the first time on how to do this. So Marty's words and his voice and his lessons are in my head, every time I broadcast a game. He was a huge influence on me, and many of us who came from Fordham or came from this area who grew up on Marv Albert, it's really, we're all coming from the Marty Glickman tree. And he had a huge influence in my career.
You grew up in New York, Fordham University guy, fan of Marv Albert. Were you a Knicks fan as a kid?
When I was younger, I was a huge Bernard King fan. Okay. And Bernard actually got drafted by the Nets originally and played a couple of years there and ended his career. His last year was with the Nets, but and I actually was doing some work with the Nets at the time and got to meet Bernard in his final year with the Nets. But I did. I was a much bigger college basketball fan, and I for some reason or another I gravitated towards Villanova in the early '80s. And I had my uncle's brother went to Villanova, so I started watching these Villanova games on Big East, Big Monday or whatever it was back then on ESPN. And, I started liking Villanova and followed them in the championship years, so I sort of developed a rivalry with Georgetown. And when Patrick Ewing ended up going to the Knicks, I sort of started to lose. Like, nothing against Patrick, because I know Patrick now as an assistant with the Orlando Magic, and he's a great guy, but I for some reason turned away from the Knicks a little bit when they got, after Bernard King got hurt, and they focused around Ewing, and so I was more of a college basketball fan at that point. But yeah, when I was younger, I guess I was more of a Knicks fan than a Nets fan. But I do remember those Net teams in the '80s too, with Derek Coleman, even well before Derek Coleman. When you go back to the new Mike Newlands and Michael Corrins and Jaminsky and Buck Williams and Michael Ray and Ray Williams, who played for both teams too. I used to wear number 13 as a grammar school player and playing basketball because of Ray Williams. So I gravitated toward both of the New York area teams, and obviously now spending 2 decades with the Nets, they're part of my blood now.
Yeah. What's your favorite sports movie?
My favorite, I think it probably is a tie.
Yeah.
I can't give you one, but I have to give you Hoosiers. I have to give you The Natural, and would you consider Raging Bull a sports movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to give you Raging Bull is probably the best.
Top 3, yeah.
But I would say Raging Bull from a movie perspective is probably my favorite, followed by Hoosiers and The Natural.
All good choices. Now, your partner on the air, Tim Capstraw, you guys have a wonderful on-air chemistry that we get to listen to. What's it like working with Tim, and why do you think you guys match up so well together?
Tim has made it such a pleasure over the last 10 years to do the games with him. I worked 1 year with Kelly Chapuka, and then Kelly went over to TV, and Tim came on as my partner these last 10 years. And, I had a lot of influence in hiring Tim, and, Tim did not have your normal pedigree for an NBA analyst. He had never done NBA games. He had never been part of the NBA. But he was a college coach. He had a lot of ties to the coaching fraternity. And he had come highly recommended by some guys that I really respect, like Mike Breen, who knew him, and Jack Armstrong, who's a broadcaster up in Toronto, who was a New York guy who knew him, and I had known Jack. So I had gotten recommendations from real guys that I really respect. And what I liked about Tim was that I knew that he knew enough people in the coaching fraternity that he would have a lot of connections throughout the league, that he'd be able to get information, and that he may not know the NBA game all that well at the start, but he knew basketball, and he'd know the right people, and he'd get the information, and he had a great personality. And everybody that knows Tim in person is drawn to him because he's just a terrific guy and a pleasure to be around. And when you spend as much time with a partner as you have to do when you're an NBA broadcaster, it's important to have a guy that's upbeat and positive and that you like being with. He knows the role. He really understands the role of an analyst on radio. He's an incredibly unselfish broadcaster, and he doesn't care who makes a point as long as the point is made. And we're able to finish each other's sentences. We know where we're going to go with things. I know where to lead him. He knows where to lead me, and we know how to get the best of each other out there. And it's really been a pleasure. He's not only become my radio partner, he's one of my best friends right now. So it's one of the great things that's come out of the last 10 years is working with Tim.
Take me through a typical day with you as a play-by-play guy. Let's say the tip-off is at 7:05. What's the average day like for you, and how do you prepare for the night's game?
I always tell people that preparing for a game is like studying for a test. You have to know the coursework and the material, and you can't just cram the night before. During an NBA season, it's 6 months worth of preparation. You have to just follow the league. You can't fall behind for days at a time. You have to know what's going around the league every day. And it makes it easier when it comes time to prepare for that night's game. It is a bit of you're a vampire because you're working at night and you're traveling late at night. So mornings are, you gotta make sure you do the things you need to at home and see your kids off to school. And then when you have that quiet time in the morning, I like to, do my notes that I'll do for the game. Make sure my chart so available to you early on in the day. It used to be where you had to wait to get to the arena that night to get your game notes. Now I can look at them at 10 o'clock in the morning and go through them. And then, I try and get as much as I can get done early so that I, take a few moments to relax in the afternoon and then get over to the arena, 2.5 hours before the game. I have to interview the coach about 2 hours before the game, before every game, and then spend your time talking to other broadcasters. Usually my counterparts on the other team can give me some insight into their players and what's going on with them. And, you may see a coach or two that you can, over the years, you get your contacts, you can get some information from as well. Not that you're trying to find any information to leak it on the air or break any stories, just to, get a sense of where you should be focusing on and not focus on the wrong thing. I mean, you may have had an opinion about something and then you find out you're a little off base.
Right.
And, so that's helpful as well. And that's kind of the typical day for a home game for an NBA broadcaster. And a lot of your time is spent traveling as well. And that has its own sort of challenges. And but it's basically the same kind of thing. When you're on the road, it's a little more relaxed. You don't have some of the things you have to get done at home. But at the same time, now you have to fly after games and get in late at night and arrive bleary-eyed in the next city. And but it's certainly an interesting way of living, and it's fun, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
Last game in New Jersey, my dad and I went. It was a really nice night. It was kind of a weird night. It felt just strange. It was the last game in New Jersey. What was your experience like that night?
It was nice to see a lot. What ended up happening was, I think it became sort of a pilgrimage for all the people that have come through the Nets family over the years, not just the players, but I know a lot of people who had worked in the office for a long time ago, people that I had worked with 15 years ago, who I hadn't seen in probably 8 or 9 years, and to see those people there, everybody felt the need to be there that night. So it was interesting to see that. It was nice that they acknowledged the fans of New Jersey and brought back the players and brought out the championship trophies in the Eastern Conference, and it was nice to acknowledge that the way they did, but realize that there are going to be a lot of people that can't make the trip over to Brooklyn, but we're not moving out of the market. It's still, the name is still the Nets. There's still that connection to the days of the ABA and Dr. J and the